I'm Ethan Barron, and welcome to my final project for Managerial Economics. Today, we'll be looking at the relationship between the health of the American economy compared to the performance of the global GDP. So to start us off, let's get into how strong America is economically. So in 1960, America represented 40% of the global GDP. America is rich in the amount of natural resources it has, including coal, lumber, other natural resources. It's also profited off of both world wars, whereas the rest of the world were enfeebled by at least one of them. So with the rest of the world being down, America was able to be lifted up and become the greatest economic influence in that time. So with that said, as of 2014, America's contribution to the global GDP has decreased by half to about 20%, and it might have gone down even more since then. So does that mean that America's influence has weakened, or do they still play a major role in influencing the world's economies? So let's get into the hypothesis for regression analysis. So the hypothesis I'll be presenting on is America's economic health. Does America's economic health greatly influence the rest of the world's economic performance? So with that null hypothesis, there's also the alternative hypothesis in that America has a small to no influence in the health of the world's economy. So to find out if the null hypothesis is correct or not, we must look at the historical data concerning America's economy and the measurement of the world's economy. So now we'll get into the data that as presented in this report. The independent variables will be factors that contribute to a healthy economy, that being America for this report. The dependent variable will be the measurement of the global economy, that being the sum of the world's GDP. Data presented will be between the dates of July 1st, 1967 to April 1st, 2015. All independent variables minus the binary variable will be presented as on a monthly basis, whereas the binary independent and the dependent variables are presented yearly. The reason for that is because the data that was available only came in those two formats. So to reconcile the difference, the yearly data was copied and pasted 11 times to fill in for the rest of the months within the designated year. The dependent variable, for example, will be the same number throughout each respective month of the year. So moving on. So the independent variables will include America's personal consumption expenditures, or PCE, in billions, average American personal savings rate per month, American unemployment number in thousands, and then the binary data will be the standard S&P 500 stock index percentage of performance, whether it's positive or negative. And then the dependent variable will be the GDP of the world per year. So first we'll look at America's personal consumption expenditures. So this is presented in billions of dollars, and it shows how much Americans are spending each year. If they're spending more, that means they have excess savings that they are spending on, which also means that they are more optimistic, that the population is more optimistic about the economy's health. The p-value for this uh, in the regression analysis is 0. So it is safe to say that this is statistically significant. The next coefficient in this regression analysis is the average American personal savings rate. It's presented in billions of dollars again, and Americans, this shows that how much Americans have in savings after necessary expenses are paid for. So this indicator focuses more on the low to middle class population, as they will have an excess amount to spend after they've paid off all of their necessary expenses. So the p-value in this regression analysis for this coefficient is a 0.79 zeros before getting to the number 37. It's a 3.7 multiplied by a 0 with the decimal point and 79 zeros behind it. Therefore, it's safe to say it is also statistically significant. The next coefficient is the American unemployment numbers. So this is presented in thousands, and if the economy is doing well, that means businesses are growing. There's more businesses being built out. Therefore, there's an increase in job capacity to be filled. So the p-value of this relationship is 0.0086, which is still very statistically significant. And then finally, we have our binary function, or coefficient, I should say, which is the S&P 500 stock index percentage of performance. So if the S&P 500 went up in a month, it will receive a 1. If it went down in a month, it will receive a 0. I decided to make this a binary function as the S&P 500 is volatile compared to these other metrics. They can change a lot within each month, so stating if it made any gains or losses each month would be a better measurement. So the p-value of this was very high at 0.27. So therefore, it's safe to say it is not statistically significant. So after looking through those coefficients and the relationship to the global GDP, after running that multiple regression analysis, it's quite clear that there is a relationship between the health of the American economy and the GDP of the world. If one were to only look at the scatter plots comparing each of the independent variables by the dependent variable, especially when looking at the savings and unemployment rate, there appears to be no correlation. However, the high multiple R value of 0.989 proves the overwhelming strength of the relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variables. Near to 1 R squared value of 0.979 for the set shows how the variables in combination are close to the predictor variables given from the regression analysis as well. It's fair to conclude that the regression analysis model is statistically significant. Most of the variables are also statistically significant, minus the binary variable. So with our data findings, after we saw the multiple R and the R squared being so high, we were able to create an accurate testing mechanism of using the point slope formula with the coefficients added into the formula to create predicted amounts of global GDP based off of America's economic health. So using the data from 2005, which used a binary of 1, it's 94% accurate. Also using data from the 1969 listing, as it listed a binary of 0, it was 91% accurate. And over to the right, you'll see the fictional amount that I came up with, and judging that on the actual amounts and predicted amounts from 2005 and 1996, it looks quite fair. These findings prove that the strength and health of the American economy strongly influences the growth or decline of the world's economy. One may argue that the model, however, does not prove who influences whom. Does America influence the world, or does the world influence America? For this argument to be debunked, one must look at America's imports and exports compared to its GDP level to determine how much America depends on the rest of the world for its needs. That's something that I missed in this regression analysis that I could have added to buffer my null hypothesis. Because if America is self-sufficient enough, they would clearly be the driving force of the global economy after looking at my regression analysis, as variables like unemployment and savings would not be affected as much to global economic conditions. So using this data as an investor, I would place most of my portfolio holdings in America. If America has a large of a weight in the conditions of the world's economy as much as this data shows, it would be risk effective to invest into America than any other country. Investing in another country runs the risk of the economy declining, not based on how the country's economy how it operates well or not, but how America's economy would fare. Focusing your investments in good companies headquartered in America would decrease your risk to return ratio.